Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022. Good morning, everyone.
I'll say hello, and I wanted to welcome everyone to the Global Women's Breakfast of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. We're very honored to have Provost and Professor Teresa Woodruff as our speaker this morning. She will be joining us about 9 a.m. And so what I'm intending is that in the interim, I think while people are having breakfast, I will, among other things, show a video provided by Iupac about the Global Women's Breakfast and emphasize that the priority for today's event is to consider opportunities and actions that can advance women's participation in science globally. Provost Woodruff herself, via her research and her leadership, has contributed significantly in this direction. So for a moment, I'll probably just be silent and show the lead-in slide from the Global Women's Breakfast video, but we'll watch that closer to the time that the provost is going to arrive. And I'd like to thank everyone for participating. I don't think that everyone that I would like to thank is online yet, but I would like to particularly mention Provost Woodruff's contributions in giving the speech for this event. And then I'd like to recognize additional contributions. Angela Wilson in the Department of Chemistry is currently the national president of the American Chemical Society. And so she will actually be introducing the provost, but she has to leave for a meeting of the American Chemical Society before this session will be totally over. So I'll be taking over to moderate the questions at the end of the session. And then I'd also like to thank Professor Tim Warren in the Department of Chemistry, who's organized an in-person event for the Global Breakfast. And then especially Elizabeth Puglisi, who is leading the Women in Chemistry this year in the department. This is an organization that was in fact, a grassroots organization started by the women graduate students who asked Professor Karen Draths if she would serve as advisor to them, and she agreed to do that. So this has been running for 3 or 4 years now, very successfully, very active group of women promoting the interests of people in chemistry. And I should mention that although this group is called Women in Chemistry 2.0, it is open to both men and women. And we've had a lot of men participating in the sessions, especially if they're about professional development or career planning. So I see that Angela is online. I don't know if you joined in time to hear what I was thinking about doing during this interval before you are introducing the provost and before the provost shows up, but there is a video that Iupac has posted for the Global Women's Breakfast, and it's about 4 minutes. I thought we could show that maybe around 8:45.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
So, and good morning, everyone.
Yeah. Oh, I see now that Sarah Ford, who's in the provost's office and has been the liaison for developing this program, is online too. And I'd like to give my thanks to Sarah for her participation. And I noticed also Karen Wenk in development. I worked with Karen while she was in the College of Natural Science. Now she's moved to the Central University Development Office. So we're glad to see her here. And all of the other participants, I won't be able to recognize everybody by name, but we're certainly glad to have everyone with us.
Sarah's actually in the College Development Office.
Ah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and Karen, go ahead, Karen.
I'm still with the college, so.
Okay.
Yep. And Sarah is our alumni person, so.
Oh yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Sarah does so much with our alumni. It's just amazing. So everything from the I always forget the names of all the programs, Sarah. So do you want to do a little overview?
Sure. So I oversee the alumni relations for the College of Natural Science. And then I also, with Angela, oversee the Dean's Research Scholar Program, which is a group of undergraduate students whose major is in NatSci, who are taking part in research on campus. And the development team and I will take them, well, pre-COVID, we took them on the road with us to give research presentations to groups of alumni, to talk to alumni about the impacts of scholarships and what that's, made on their time here at Michigan State. So it's a really outstanding group. So yeah, I'm happy to be here today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So as we wait, I'm curious where everyone is from. I certainly recognize some people from the chemistry department, but is there anyone who's not from the MSU chemistry department besides Karen and Sarah?
My name is Melinda Mcewen, and I am from Computational Mathematics, Science, and Engineering, which is housed between NatSci and the Engineering Department.
Great, Melinda. Thanks for joining us today. Others?
Hi, my name is Alicia, and I'm from the Kellogg Biological Station and Integrative Biology.
Oh, terrific. Nice to meet you, Alicia.
I'm Artemis from Department of Physics and Astronomy and AFRIB.
Hello, Artemis. Good to see you again.
I'm Kathy
I
Ernst,
am
with Animal
I'm
Science
Marianne.
and involved with the genetics program.
Oh, great, Catherine. Nice to meet you.
Okay, Marianne Hübner from Statistics and Probability and from the CSTAT, Center for Statistical Training and Consulting.
Terrific. Thanks for coming.
I'm Maggie Caulfield from Translational Neuroscience in the Grand Rapids campus.
Great. Thank you.
Laura McCabe in Physiology and Office of Regulatory Affairs.
Great. Good to see you, Laura.
We have a couple of people who have introduced themselves in the chat, and I wonder if they could come online, at least via speech, to let us all know you're there. Katie?
I'm LaConte Dill from African American and African Studies, or AAAS.
Thank you.
Oh, terrific. Delighted you're joining us today.
Thanks, great to be here.
Katie Gruszak from the Michigan DNI. I was forwarded this invitation by my brother who's in the College of Natural Sciences.
Yeah, great, thank you.
I'm Heidi Purdy. I'm with the Natural Sciences Dean's Office.
Thanks, Heidi. Good morning.
Christy Lopez. I'm actually with the Michigan Department of Education, but I'm a BFA student in graphic design.
Mm-hmm. That's
Nice
great.
to meet you, Christy.
Hi there, I'm Joe. I'm a faculty candidate for MSU Chemistry, and Karen Drath's invited me to participate today, so I'm just seeing what it's all about today.
Yeah,
Can we twist your arm to come here yet, Joe?
You're making progress.
Okay. Thanks for coming this morning. So those of you in chemistry, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves as well?
I think some of the chemists may be meeting in person, so that they don't have an easy connection to the.
They don't want to all run to the middle of the room.
That's right.
So I'm Sheba. I am the undergraduate advisor in chemistry.
Good morning, Sheba.
Good morning, Angela.
Good to see you here.
Good to see you.
And the others may be all in a room. Yeah, in chemistry they were gathering in a room, but Kathy and I aren't in there because it's a little hard to try to moderate this from the same room that everyone else is in. So. So since we're all together, I guess we can talk about all kinds of things, but today is really kind of a celebration of women and telling a little bit of stories that, the Provost is going to tell us, a bit about her career and kind of some of her strategies towards success. And I'm just wondering if everyone can just kind of, we've got chemists and scientists of all ages and stages on this meeting, and so just wondering if if everyone could just kind of say, kind of a strategy or a piece of advice or something that has worked for you. Just trying to keep this on a positive note this morning. So, Kathy, do you want to start, or am I putting you on the spot here?
Well. My circumstances were a bit different from the circumstances of young women now, because I was the first woman to join the faculty in the Department of Chemistry. And the Department of Chemistry had existed at the university for 124 years without apparently needing to have a woman in the department, but I was in effect a groundbreaker for women in chemistry. I'd say that it's not really a strategy, but the thing that has kept me going all the time through easy times and difficult times has been the fact that I really love the work that I'm doing. And I've been committed to discovering new science. And from time to time, I've obtained new results. I had one result that I obtained where I thought I was going to be ecstatic for the rest of my life. It lasted about 2 weeks, but it's been tremendously exciting to pursue theoretical chemistry. And I think everyone who goes into science really is motivated by the joy and the thrill of discovery in the field. And there are many, many opportunities. The opportunities just keep expanding to discover things. As we learn more, there's more and more that can be explored. So that, I guess, I didn't expect Angela to ask me to talk about that, but that's my brief summary.
Thanks, Kathy. Anyone else want to share something that you found to be useful or a word of advice? I'm going to pick on Shiva because Shiva, you work with so many undergraduate students. And so what is something that you would want all undergraduate students to hear or to know?
So one of the things that just like I believe like all the advisors is to ask the students to make sure that they are utilizing the resources on campus for the academic success. And really like one of the things is to make sure that they're meeting with their instructors, making use of their office hours. I know that most of the students, when they're new, they don't feel comfortable doing that. So it's just encouraging them to get out of their comfort zones and reach out. And just to point out that, it's very important to build those relationships with the instructors. So just pushing them along those lines is one of the things. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And actually following that, I'm going to add a little bit in terms of, for me, I think, the undergraduate years were so important because that's a great time to identify what some of your, we all have weaknesses, we all have strengths, and the undergraduate years are really a great time to start identifying what some of these weaknesses are and really trying to challenge yourself to overcome them. I used to be so shy. It was just amazing. I was such an introvert. And, I decided to push myself to do some things to try to kind of get over that. And so kind of went to some extremes, but certainly did try to conquer that. And so, I just encourage students to kind of, take one of these, one step at a time and dealing with these. Yeah. And the other point I'm going to make is that, especially for women and men who are mentoring women, I think a great book is called The Confidence Code, and it talks about how 95% of women really suffer, a bit in terms of confidence. And a couple of reporters had interviewed women world leaders and talked about how so many of them just don't have as much confidence as men. There was an HP study done many years ago, Iupac, and what they found was that women wouldn't apply for positions unless they met 100% of the qualifications for leadership positions, whereas men would apply if they met 60%. And this is nothing at all negative about men or women. It's just acknowledging one of the differences and just something to keep in mind. So this book is just amazing. So I do certainly recommend it. So anyone else want to give a comment or thought? So I'm going to call on somebody then. And Heidi, I know, Heidi, you work with so many undergrad students as well. So do you have any advice you'd like to share or thoughts?
In terms of working with undergraduate students, I think the best thing to get them to understand is that now is the time to try. Now is the time to fail and learn from it. Now is the time to pick yourself back up and build that resilience. So often students come to us, especially in the sciences, because they've been so strong in their math and their science foundation in high school that they think they're going to come and just rule the world when they get here. And when they don't, they hit that first Chem 141 exam and realize that it's different than it was in high school. They're in our offices saying, I need to drop this, I need to get out. And so it's really encouraging them to persevere and to keep moving through and to keep making sure that this is the right pathway for them and that they do belong and that they are a part of our scientific future. And so just really helping them to see that what they're doing is the right way. And now is the time to make those changes and build those skills so that they are ready for the next step.
That's great.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful comments, Heidi. Really great points. Thank you. So others.
Agnes has her hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, what I wanted to mention, especially being in a man-dominated field, there's a lot of microaggressions geared towards women, and so we all have different experiences, like we heard before. So one thing at least I try to work with my group and encourage all the women in our group is to speak up when something happens. And I tell them things that I feel is weird. This person said this so-and-so to me, and this made me feel uncomfortable. So if I do that, then it encourages them to speak up. And so just creating a culture where even little things we can talk about, so then they don't feel like they're alone and they don't know, is this right, is this wrong? So just trying to create an atmosphere where they can talk about these things.
Great, thank you. That's a wonderful strategy. Other suggestions, comments?
Marianne has her hand up.
Marianne.
Oh yes. Sorry. I would like to suggest that to support. I really like what was just said about speaking up. It was a conscious decision for me to speak up in almost every meeting, which changed a lot of things. And what I really appreciated and what I like to do is when other women speak up in a meeting, that I support them immediately with saying, yeah, I agree, or something. Otherwise, they will be easily overheard.
Marian, I think that's a wonderful strategy. I think so often women don't speak up. And, it's hard to get to that point where, where we, to really encourage women to speak up. But I really encourage graduate students and undergraduate students to start doing that. And, a great strategy to start doing that is if you feel uncomfortable, actually, going ahead and asking the question verbally, to start writing down the question. Every seminar you go to, every meeting you go to, at least write down a question or two. And once you get in the practice of doing that, you'll get to the point where you do feel comfortable asking that question orally. And it's really important to get to that habit as when you're an undergraduate or graduate student, really important. So thank you so much for that point, Marian. Other questions or comments? I know there's a lot of graduate student women participating. And so, especially those of you who've been in the field a bit, in the sciences a bit, it would be wonderful for you to, to make a few comments.
Jelani?
Hi, yes, I'm sorry, I joined late, so I didn't realize the question, but I actually tell my students to be really honest from the beginning, and I have a lot of women graduate students, and that just telling them just be honest about your feelings, but when you're trying to speak, don't try to step on other people's toes, but just I tell my ULAs and TAs and my graduate students, and I say that when the same thing can be said in many different ways, So by selecting the right words, you might be able to get your idea across without really putting anyone else in an uncomfortable position. So sometimes that has helped. It has helped me. And, you know, I don't like to come out as saying, you know, I know everything, because I don't. And just kind of put it out as an idea in a little bit more with a softer blow, even when talking to students, when it's even very, very obvious that someone has not done assignments and they're giving lame excuses. I don't go out and say, well, that's a really bad excuse. I just say, well, have you considered this? Can you answer these questions for me so I can make a decision for you? And then, you know, a lot of the times it helps because they realize they did the wrong thing. So I don't have to really tell them that. So I don't know, that's something I do.
Great, thank you. I think I saw another hand. I did, and then it disappeared. Oh, here we go. Alicia.
Hello, I am a new assistant professor at KBS, the Kellogg Biological Station and Integrative Biology. I don't know that I have any strategies necessarily that will help. A lot of you are much more advanced than I am. But one thing that I am trying to do, and I think has worked a little bit, is just to be kind to myself and realize that when I don't know something, or if that imposter syndrome starts to really rear its ugly head, I just try to practice kindness. And I think I could have done that a lot in grad school and during my postdoc, but I didn't know that strategy, and I'm doing that now. So if it helps someone, thanks.
Great, thank you. And that being kind to yourself, you know, it really in so many different ways is important. It's also important in terms of the work-life balance piece as well, making sure that you're taking the time to make sure that you're healthy and exercising and whatever. You've got an outlet outside of work is so incredibly important as well. Other comments?
Comment here for just a second that when Angela was about to become the president of the American Chemical Society at the national level, the organization sent out a leadership survey to respond with characteristics that Angela had that would make her especially successful, and then any suggestions for things that she might consider. And I had a very long list of characteristics that would make her successful as the leader of the organization. But the only real suggestion that I had to make her successful, and that I think ties in with what has just been said, is that it's important to build in a little bit of slack in your schedule, because unexpected events always happen. And the pandemic is probably the example par excellence of that. But there can be unexpected demands of your time. And it's probably important to allow a little bit of room to be able to respond to those.
And following that, and this is kind of more of a lessons learned piece of advice on my end, is the fact that, you know, when you need to have that slack time, don't just always take it from your balanced part of life. Make sure that you're, you know, taking care of yourself, and that's so incredibly important. So, and you may not discover that in your 20s and 30s, but when you're in your 40s and 50s and beyond, you do. So, other comments?
I do have the Iupac video, which is a little over 4 minutes, that I could share.
Sure, that would be
this
great.
Would be a good time to do that.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Let's see. I think you have disabled screen sharing for me.
Sarah, could you enable it?
You should be good now. I just remade you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
So I think this will
Good
be
morning,
playing.
everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Iupac Global Women's Breakfast. Mary, I'm thrilled to partner with you again to launch this amazing event.
Hello, Laura. We have the great honor together to greet everyone and to welcome them to this year's celebration of the achievements of women in science. I can picture scientists all around the world leaping out of bed this morning to meet with their friends and colleagues.
The wonderful thing about the breakfast, Mary, is the warm feeling of belonging and shared purpose with the more than 300 groups around the world.
You and I both have a great appreciation for the critical importance of building professional networks.
You know, amazingly, both of our journeys started with a fascination with chemistry and water. Inspired by my first environmental chemistry professor, I got to travel on research ships on the world's largest lakes, and I met scientists from different countries who became mentors and collaborators.
And in my case, I would never have imagined as an undergraduate studying chemistry in the UK that I would move to do postdoctoral research underwater on the Great Barrier Reef. But it was while attending regional meetings in Asia that I first became inquisitive about how other communities do their science and how young people develop into well-rounded scientists.
For me, it was an Iupac conference where I came to understand the enormous value of networking at an international forum.
Absolutely. We met at an Iupac meeting in Puerto Rico. So I watched some of the wonderfully creative groups sharing what this year's breakfast means to them.
Unity in diversity. Yay!
Wow, those were amazing. I'm really excited to announce today that the next breakfast will be held on the 14th of February, 2023, and registration will open later this year, so keep an eye on the website.
That's Valentine's Day. And next year, the breakfast will also be part of the celebration for the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development. So we encourage you to reach out to organizations in other maths and science disciplines to organize an event or to join your event.
And finally, we ask you to join the global conversation about the breakfast using our short Mentimeter poll. Just scan the QR code with your mobile device to participate, and you can see the results in real time as they come in on the GWB website.
Thank you to all the event organizers, to our GWB task group members for their work this year, and also thank you to our sponsors.
And sending out a special thanks to Dr. Lynn Sobey, Executive Director of Iupac, for her leadership and support.
Have fun, everyone, and we will see you again next year.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy, for showing that. Really appreciate it.
So it was quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. You know, Mary Garson and Laura McConnell started this a number of years ago and really wanted to draw more attention to women across the globe. Even in the US, you know, I think we have so many privileges over women in many other countries, and it's very interesting. I'm involved in Iupac, and it's very interesting to talk to women in different parts of the globe, and some of them, of course, are a little bit more advanced in terms of women in science than the US is, but there's many countries where women in science are not even at the same table. And so they really brought this together to have more conversations, and draw more attention to women across the world. And so really appreciate everyone joining us today for this. One more thing I was going to mention in terms of Iupac. For those of you who are listening, if you know of dynamic women across the globe that you would like to nominate for a national award, Iupac does have an international recognition program. It's the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, Outstanding Woman in Science, or in chemistry or chemical engineering. So I encourage you to consider nominating women for this award. It's a really nice opportunity, and about 10 to 12 women each year are recognized, every other year are recognized for this. So today we're going to go ahead and get started now with the program. Thanks so much for many of you for joining earlier. It was nice to meet many of you. And there are many more people that are listed, the 42 or whatever, because there is a whole room of people in chemistry gathered together to join us as well today. So thanks everyone for joining us. So let me tell you, if you didn't catch the video, today we're celebrating the Global Breakfast, the Global Women's Breakfast. And basically it's held each year in conjunction with the United Nations Day of Women and Girls in Science. We don't always hit that exact day, but we're pretty close to it. And the aim is really to celebrate the accomplishments of women in science and to inspire younger generations to pursue STEM careers. And so women and men from all types of science organizations come together to share breakfast. Obviously today, many of us are virtually or in person, and the central goal is to really establish an active network of both men and women to increase diversity in all areas of science. And so this is just kind of the Global Women's Breakfast. They're just trying to formulate more organizations, local, regional, and international scale to effectively share ideas and strategies for progress towards women in science. So I welcome all of you, and I welcome our provost, our guest speaker, Professor Provost Teresa Woodruff. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Woodruff here. Provost Woodruff, she is Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Michigan State University. As Chief Academic Officer, she provides leadership for matters related to academic programs, research and outreach involving faculty, students, and academic staff. She oversees the quality of instruction, scholarship, and leadership development at the university through collaborative work with deans, faculty, and student leaders. Provost Woodruff directs policies related to faculty and administers the university procedures and criteria for faculty appointments, promotions, and tenure. Provost Woodruff is responsible for advancing the academic mission of MSU, enabling the quality of student learning curriculum oversight, as well as admissions and recruitment for undergraduate and graduate programs. She enables strategic priorities and related academic budgetary planning. Prior to joining MSU in August of 2020, Provost Woodruff served as the Dean and Associate Provost for Graduate Education in the Graduate School at Northwestern University and held the Watkins Professorship in the Department of I'm sorry, I haven't drank my water this morning, of bear with me, basically obstetrics and gynecology. In addition to her role as Provost, Woodruff is MSU Foundation Professor in the Department of Gynecology and Reproductive Biology and the Department of Biomedical Engineering. Provost Woodruff is an internationally recognized biologist specializing in reproductive science. In 2006, she coined the term oncofertility to describe the merging of two fields, oncology and fertility preservation. Working at the national level, Woodruff championed the new National Institute of Health policy mandating the inclusion of females in fundamental research. Absolutely incredible, accomplishment. As a leading research scientist, teacher, and mentor, Woodruff was awarded the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science Mentoring by President Obama in an Oval Office ceremony in 2011. Most recently, Woodruff received the Endocrine Society's 2021 Iupac Laureate Award, a top honor that recognizes the highest achievements in the field of endocrinology and is in the inaugural class of Distinguished Fellows of the Society for the Study of Reproduction in 2021. She holds 17 U.S. patents, is the past president of the Endocrine Society, and was the editor-in-chief for the journal Endocrinology. She has published over 400 papers and edited or authored 6 books. She is an elected fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences 2020, the National Academy of Medicine since 2018, the National Academy of Inventors, the American Institute for Medical and Biomedical Engineers, the Guggenheim Foundation, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Provost Woodruff holds honorary degrees from Bates College and University of Birmingham School of Medicine and has delivered the commencement address at numerous institutions. She is civically active and a member of the Economic Club of Chicago and a former Board of Trustees member for the Adler Planetarium and the Young Women's Leadership Charter School. She earned her undergraduate degree with majors in zoology and chemistry. Among her society memberships, she is a member of the American Chemical Society. Without further ado, I introduce to you our rock star provost, Teresa Woodruff.
Well, thank you so much. And I loved watching the little clip for all of us who are celebrating today's Global's Women's Day. And this is such an exciting time to be with all of you. So I'm going to share my screen. Angela, is there a way you can offer me that opportunity?
Sarah, can you please provide that?
And so I thought what I thought I'd do today is kind of take a little spin around some of the work that I've done and try and arc that into some perhaps thoughts that we could have as we think sitting here today about, there we go. I can't multitask on this one, so let me do this. Let's see, are you seeing my screen? No, I see, I have 2 screens. Let me make this easier, okay. So, I think you can see my screen now. Catherine, Angela, can you see my screen? Just nod. Yep. Okay. Very good. So, I'm going to talk about equations for our lives. But as I was putting this, my thoughts together for what I wanted to bring to you today, I thought I'd make it even a little bit more nuanced than a 1, a 2, and a 3. I thought I'd give you 3 discoveries that will change our lives. And maybe that sounds like hubris. So at the end, you'll have to tell me if it is or not. Just what to watch, how we can actually develop our lives as well as those for the women and girls who follow us in science, and what discoveries might change their lives into the future. So let me start with a hypothesis. I thought that might be good for this particular group. So I'm going to try and posit some of this work in terms of hypothesis. And for the first segment of these 3 parts, I'm going to suggest that the next generation of advances that improve the lives of all people will require fundamental discovery research that includes sex as a biological variable. And this might sound like a funny topic for us to start with, but I do want to create a warning for you as I get started that in fact some of the work that I'll present might be a tad upsetting, that in fact until just recently modern science and medicine did not routinely account for sex as a variable. And so this really came to the fore when the Institute of Medicine, now the National Academy of Medicine, put together a report that was really a clarion call to action, something we had been working on for some number of years called Shorter Lives, Poorer Health. And what it really shows here is that the mortality rate of males and females by individual counties across the United States for men are substantially improving over the 2 decades from the 90s to the 2000s, while for females, this was really worsening. And this is something that when I was a postdoc at Genentech, I did a little stint at Genentech after my graduate work and was the only woman at that biotech company at the time. And we had a trial on a drug that many of you will know today, a tissue plasminogen activator, which is still used for heart attack or for stroke. And when the first trials were coming out, I was sitting in a room as these were being presented. And, the trial had about 10,000 men. So as a postdoc, I raised my hand and I asked, well, what happens when when that drug is delivered to women? And there was kind of a silence that just folks didn't quite know what to do, probably with both my raised hand and with the question. And so finally, one of the lead scientists said, well, Woodruff, don't worry, we'll get to that in our next trial. So the next trial was about 4 years later, the last year that I was at Genentech. And so the trialist got up and said, and now I have an answer for Woodruff. Here are the data for our GISI-2 trial. And it was with 10,000 Italian men. And to which I had to remind them that Italian men weren't actually women, but that's really the state of affairs. And so this led to a lifetime of interest from that time of raising my hand and really looking at sex as a biological variable not being represented in biology or in the literature at all. And of course, we think of that in terms of genes, the X and the Y chromosome. We often think about that in terms of hormones, estrogen and progesterone, testosterone. But we also have to think in terms of the anatomy, the physiology of males and females, as well as the microbiota that actually have sex differences that have been revealed in the last several years. And we've been publishing on each of these matters to really describe what is lost when we don't include sex as biological variable. So from 1991, when I raised my hand, or about 1989, so in that era, 1991, 8% of the papers had both sexes, 65% were males. But in fact, that number had gotten worse over time to about 2011, where in fact, most of the research was done in females. This happened to be one of the papers that was on surgical research. And so then we also looked at, do sex disparities exist when the studies are of diseases that are more prevalent in females than males? And you can see many of those that are here. And the answer is that 44% of those studies didn't specify the sex studied. Oops. And of those that specified sex, 88% included only males. So that really represented the difficulty for this area. And in terms of messaging, it was perhaps at the time hard to disseminate the message to the public efficiently and tough to generate the political capital and really to boil it down to one sentence. And then came an era, despite all of the publications that we had done, when Ambien was pulled from market. And it turns out that 8 of the last 10 FDA drugs to be pulled from market were because of adverse events in females. And so if in fact the entire pipeline of scientific research, translational, and in fact clinical medicine is done on a single sex, it certainly makes sense that in fact we would have more on average adverse events that were only captured in post-marketing survey, leading to those drugs no longer being viable for either males or females. So that really doesn't make any sense. So I got a call one day from the producers of 60 Minutes. And they said, well, we believe that you've been publishing on this. And in fact, over the years, I had taken my papers and I had put them in a binder and said, someday the press will call. And when I got that call, I pulled that binder down and said, well, yes, I have a lot to say. And so that became a very important watershed moment. And that led to the change in the federal guidelines that only males, not anymore. And one of the other features of this that was really critical was that Stephen Colbert, who many of you will know on his show, highlighted this 60 Minutes segment. And I thought because we're having breakfast a little more casually, I would share with you this particular clip. So I thought on today's Global Women's Breakfast that was a clip from Colbert that was pulling out pieces of the 60-minute piece that would be good. So one of the things that Francis Collins said was most scientists want to do the most powerful experiments to get the most durable, powerful answers. For most of us, this had not been on the radar screen as an important issue. And of course, we had been publishing and talking about this for a number of years. So my the wonderful moment when this came together was when Francis Collins did call me and was going to change the federal guidelines. So on January 25th, 2016, we were able to get the federal guidelines so that all scientific grants had to consider sex as a biological variable. So what's happened since 2016? Well, we looked at the grant behavior, the behavior of peer review sections and what their attitude was towards these, towards the changes. It really suggested that women were 44% of the respondents, but were significantly more likely to view the policy as favorable versus men. We're doing a reanalysis of this with study sections today. And one piece of this as well, and I'm just skipping around a bit to bring you a couple of pieces of data here, is that it's part of this is really the economy for women in science. We earn 64 cents to a man's dollar in scientific prizes. And I should mention that all of the data that I'm sharing with you are publications that I've had over time, and I can share with you some of those publications as you need. But women's earn 64 cents on to a man's dollar on scientific prizes. And in fact, we receive $40,000 less on average in NIH funding than men. And this is with all the variables, biases in the data actually eliminated. So why so few women in science? Well, part of it is less prestige, less visibility. And so even when you have that Nobel laureate new idea, being able to get that visibility is often very difficult. So are all of these things related? Is the lack of females, is the lack of biology consideration of sex as a biological variable? Is the lack of women in science? Is it the economy? Is it the visibility? So my first point is let's do the experiment. Let's increase the diversity of our research workforce. And let's see if we in fact improve the health of all of us so that those disparities that are really one despairs of, that I showed you from the National Academy's report, really can be reversed. So my prediction, my first prediction in the answer to that hypothesis is that the next generation advances that improve the lives of all people will include discoveries that include sex as a variable. And my hope is that January 25th really is recognized and appreciated each year as that day from which we move from the dark ages into a new age, when in fact we will see better health for all people because of what we've been able to do. So sex matters. So the next thing I wanted to address with you, can you still, let's see. I hope you can still hear me. So the next topic that I wanted to bring to you was that of the second topic. So the first topic is really to be inclusive. The second topic is how do we teach? And this probably is my one Nobel Prize idea, and it is part of work-life balance. Tom O'Halloran, who is pictured here, was the Morrison Professor of Chemistry, is now an MSU Foundation Professor in the Chemistry Department here at Michigan State. He serves not only as a professor in chemistry, he also happens to serve as my current husband. And so he and I actually have had a long and happy marriage with a wonderful family. We're expecting our third grandchild in about 2 weeks or so. So it's very exciting. And along the way, we made a really fantastic discovery. Tom is a chemistry expert, and he studied trace elements. He and I were walking along Lake Michigan near our house in Chicago when he asked me a very key question, which is, why do sperm have so much zinc? And he studies zinc and cadmium and all the transition elements. And I turned to him and said the 3 most unfortunate words of my life: I don't care. Now, talk about work-life balance. That really got to the heart of both his work and his life. And as I looked at him and his lower lip was trembling, I said, well, what's wrong with you? He said, well, you don't care about zinc. I said, no, it's not zinc. I don't care about the sperm. If we can study zinc in eggs, that, now we can talk. So it turns out that from that incident, we had a graduate student that was coming into the lab that summer, and we asked her to do a study that had no hypothesis. It had no predictive reason for looking at zinc in the egg. And in fact, what we discovered was really something quite remarkable. The media not found here. So let me go on to the next slide and see if this is it. So what we discovered, these are individual oocytes from mouse, and what we discovered was never predicted in all of biology. But what you're seeing is the release of zinc from the oocyte at the time of fertilization. So zinc is accrued to levels not seen in any other cell in the body. And then at the time of fertilization, it releases the zinc. And there's a whole mechanism of this biology that I won't go into today. I wanted to show you this. This is zinc in human eggs. And what you're seeing are 2 eggs that can go on to give rise to live birth and one that cannot. And what you'll see in the moment is one of the most amazing biological responses, which is the release of zinc, the first signal at the time of fertilization. So really quite a remarkable discovery that was in fact listed as one of Discover Magazine's Discoveries of the Year. And you can see in this panel of the human egg, the zinc spark in individual stills. And we linked this zinc spark to healthy eggs. And really a fun little story aside is that I was asked to give a talk at Louise Brown's 40th birthday party, Louise Brown being the first IVF baby. And interestingly, she knew all about the zinc spark. And also, if any of you are Jodi Picoult fans, she read a report on the zinc spark in the London Times and wrote the book, A Spark of Light, that keys in on it. And there's one sentence where it talks about, and then scientists discovered zinc in humans, but that had been done on mice. And when I read that, I said, yeah, by us. So it was a really exciting moment. So part of what I wanted to say in this particular section is that what we need to continually do within the reproductive sciences is to continue to educate, as we learn in discovery, we also have to teach. And so, as you know, in the reproductive sciences, for any of your kids or families who just don't understand their own reproductive health, to Google reproductive terms can sometimes get you to an unsavory part of the web. So in fact, we put together what we call the Reprotopia, a reproductive health education portal that has all of the words of reproductive science and health with short, authoritative, but accessible definitions. And we track the use of these words around the globe. And it's been really remarkable how penetrant it's been to actually take what we know and create a learning tool that can be used for all. So my second prediction, perhaps in this global breakfast, is that new knowledge requires partnership with well-informed public. And so as we invest in the education of our next generation of innovators, those women and girls, both the adults who have to teach the young girls and help then those young girls have aspirations for their future, we want to continue to bring them into the laboratory setting. For all of you who are scientists, bringing them in is really something quite remarkable. And as Angela mentioned, we had a very large program in the city of Chicago that was recognized by President Obama. And these young women have gone on to really change the world. And I always look forward to hearing from the students that have been part of our various programs, and investing not only dollars, but your intellectual knowledge, taking advantage of what you know and creating tools that in the best ethos of a land-grant institution can then help that next generation of innovators. So education matters. So sex matters, education matters. And then finally, let me bring us back to the third topic for this morning's breakfast, and then hopefully have a few minutes for questions that I know Angela wants us to get to. And I wanted to bring to you this third section, which is about my work on preservation of fertility after cancer. And this is really an area of where I think we have to be very purpose-driven. So I was asked to be the basic science director for our Comprehensive Cancer Center at Northwestern very early in my tenure at Northwestern. And I said, well, I'm not a cancer biologist, I'm a reproductive scientist. And the director at the time said, well, I think you have some leadership skills, so I'd like you to do this. So I took that on, commanding a large portfolio of philanthropic dollars to basically leverage that to help individuals who were doing cancer biology to actually advance their work. But I was still doing reproductive science, and I was sitting in a board meeting when one of the physicians told me that a young an adolescent boy had been brought down from our children's hospital to bank sperm. And I thought, well, that's really quite remarkable. That's exciting. And so I said, well, what do we do for our young women? And, this was about 1998, 1999. And he said, well, we shouldn't worry about that. They need to focus really on their cancer. And I thought, well, that was really remarkable because that just didn't biologically work. And so that started a lifelong pursuit of developing fertility options for cancer patients, which included, as you'll see, the coining of a new term, as well as creating a field of medicine. And the reason we could really work in this domain is because since the war on cancer by Nixon in 1976, there has been a rise in a number of life-preserving treatments, changes in the way we do chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And while each of these are life-extending, they can in fact threaten fertility. So because there was a need for something that was really at the intersection, a wholly new field of medicine, not oncology as a referral to reproductive medicine, but really as a new integrative field. Because young cancer patients really don't know that much about their fertility. Infertility patients are some of those who have had to wait for some period of time because of insurance and reimbursement in the United States. And they actually are very knowledgeable about their reproductive status. And in addition, we knew that developing this field would inevitably move us to younger and younger ages beyond that of the traditional IVF area. So oncofertility really represents a wholly new intersectional field that is neither oncology nor fertility, but really a whole new field of medicine. And when you create a new word, which is a great story on its own, it occurred on a New Year's Eve, actually, when I was struggling to really communicate what we were trying to accomplish. But I'll save that story for when we're in person at some point. But I also thought that, well, we should create a ribbon, which in the 2000s was the thing. But as I looked, all the ribbon colors were taken. So I created a ribbon that was really two different colors. Deep green or the deep purple representing the deep reservoir of knowledge and strength for the individual, and green representing the eternal hopefulness for tomorrow. And then the dots moving into smooth lines, with the dots representing eggs or sperm or whatever the reproductive interest was. And then our ribbon is in the expectant state. So really a way of iconographically describing the oncofertility area. And so I think this represented a way that we could create a field of medicine because people knew and saw what it was. And in addition, with all the protocols and methodologies, we didn't save them. We didn't put them behind a password protected area. We gave them away 100% altruistically from the very start. And that also allowed us to create an entire domain of medicine. So this is an older slide. At the time, 147 sites globally, but literally oncofertility now spans the world. And it's really quite remarkable how quickly a new field of medicine, which a new field of medicine had not emerged since palliative care, but this one emerged and became very quickly active. And so today, while there didn't used to be any options, a 12-day average wait from the start of treatment to the end, options and time are available even for breast cancer patients who are hormone positive. And work done by one of my graduate students who's now at University of Michigan, the fertility interventions for young cancer patients can actually improve compliance associated with durable treatments like tamoxifen. So that's very exciting, but let me now take us to some of the more recent research on our pediatric cancer patients. And so we think about fertility interventions for young women, but for children, including infants at birth, for females, we're born with all the follicles we'll ever have. They are sitting within the outer part of the ovary, the cortex, and each one of these individual follicles represents the fertile potential from puberty all the way to the menopause. And when these million follicle pools are extinguished, that represents the menopause. So this represents the entire potential for these individuals, and it is there from birth. So removing a piece or half of a tissue actually preserves that fertility future for that individual. But of course, residing within those tissues can be, in fact, the cancer that that patient is fighting. And so when we cryopreserve that tissue, being able to restore that tissue in a pediatric case is quite difficult. So that leads us to the research, and I'll show you just 1 or 2 slides on each of these topics on how we've developed follicle maturation, oocyte maturation, endocrine hormone production to allow for pubertal transition, and ways to allow for patients not only to have fertility, but cyclical hormones that support systemic health. And so really when I started this work in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was no way to grow individual follicles outside the body. And in fact, our field taught that it was impossible to do. So I sat down and really looked at the ovarian follicle, and this is a cross-section through a mouse follicle. And this is the oocyte with a set of privileged cells, the nurse cells or cumulus cells, and then a set of hormone-producing cells. And what you're seeing is this follicle, as you can see, is kind of on the move with this roughly edge toward the outside, where eventually under the right hormonal conditions, ovulation, the breakdown of the outer wall of the tissue will occur, and the oocyte will move from the inside to the outside. This is one of the most remarkable autocatalytic self-destructive events in all of biology, where the outer wall of an internal organ breaks out like a wound and then has to reseal. And so being able to recapitulate this in vitro, I thought, well, perhaps it is this 3-dimensional architecture, the way the oocyte relates to these surrounding cells, that must be maintained. And so the field of biomedical engineering was in its infancy, as many of you will know. And so I sat down with a new biomed engineer. We had just created the department, and Lonnie Shea, who was just the past chair of the department at University of Michigan, and I sat down, and we had to first exchange language, so he knew what I was trying to do. And so with human tissues, you can see these individual follicles. We can isolate each one of them individually. These, again, are not ready for ovulation. These are decades away from ovulation. And we put them in a material called alginate, which also has a really funny story for how that got used and how that got approved by a study section for us to do this work. But regardless, one of my early graduate students, Stephanie Pangus, took a leap of faith and isolated individual follicles, put them in these alginate translucent beads to test the hypothesis that the organization of the follicle really mattered to its function. And remarkably, the answer is yes. So what you're seeing now is not a central oocyte, but this is several days after development. The oocyte is now moved to one side. You're starting to get that central antrum in the middle. I'm skipping over a lot of things for the purpose of this talk, but one of the things that you're seeing here is that most remarkable event in biology, that autocatalytic self-destructive event, which is the wall of the follicle breaking down to allow the release of this oocyte in ovulation in vitro. And here is ovulation occurring over and over. And let me remind you again that growing follicles outside the body was thought to never be possible, nor was ovulation. Ovulation was thought to be a set of cues from the surrounding tissue. So needless to say, this represented one of the #1 breakthrough of the decade. And these represent the live birth that we had from these completely in vitro follicles. And of course, I was Northwestern at the time, so newborn and new age are my 2 favorite mice. We had many, many more mice, and then I was not allowed to name any more mice. So the hormonal regulation of the reproductive system, now that we have this regulation, you can see that there is a remarkable orchestration of all the hormones that then have to enable the patency of the uterus and also have effects on systemic health. So we actually cannot study the hormonal health in a broad way on the uterus or on other tissues because we use flat Petri dishes. And so we decided to develop a new system and invented a new microfluidic system for single tissues up to 5 tissues. And we now have a new system. This is solo, duet, and quintet. We have now one for 9 systems for recirculation. And you see now individual follicles under dynamic flow. Here you can see them in one of these flow tubes. And now we have, again, follicle development to ovulation, and we also have whole ovarian tissue developing with ovulation. Now, again, I told you that none of this could happen in the past. This was another top 100 discovery of the years in Discover magazine, and really suggested that structure and form function. This is the Iupac, the 5 tissues where we had mouse ovary, because we didn't want to use the human ovaries in this setup, but with mouse ovaries together with human fallopian tube, human uterus, and human cervix. And what you're seeing here is a 28-day cycle in a dish. 28 days in tissue culture just one wouldn't think could happen, but that's because we've always been using a Petri dish where the cells live in their own waste. By using microfluidics, we've really changed the paradigm. And what you're seeing here is a full follicular phase, estradiol, followed by a full luteal phase. And the downstream tissues stay functional for 28 days. And as some of you who are here today recognize, this just is really unprecedented. So we hope that this provides new personalized drug testing, but also probably new signaling pathways and completely new textbooks in the future, because we've only studied isolated cells on flat plastic, which represents no biology at all. So I think this represents a new paradigm. Well, as we return to our cancer patient, Monica Laranda wanted to take on this problem of then taking those follicles and being able to restore it to a young cancer patient. So we decellularized the human ovary, and we're able to pulverize that and make that into the first iteration of this, which was ovary paper, really making a paper. And we made paper out of every organ in the body. This was done by my postdoc and together with another biomedical engineer, Ramel Shaw. So you can actually see that process of milling it. And then this is an ovarian follicle, which we've isolated out of an ovary that had cancer within it and isolated it largely free of the cancer cells, and then sutured it onto the ovarian peduncle. But that itself is not going to be a long-term strategy for durable cycling. That would give you maybe, again, fertility, one round of follicles, but not durable cycling. So Monica, again, took on the process of using that biomaterial to now 3D print ovaries. And she did a series of experiments to look at the different organization of the follicle, of the ovary. So we actually mapped the entire structure of the ovary. And with the right geometry of the 3D printed ovary, we could place follicles in these structures, and they would take up residence. And in fact, we could get ovulation off of this 3D printed structure in vitro. Again, something that couldn't be done before. And so then we actually transplanted that ovarian bioprosthetic, or what I called a bioprosthetic. You think of a prosthetic as like a hip replacement, a piece of metal for your hip or knee. I coined the term bioprosthetic as a soft organ transplant. This is the first time a 3D printed soft organ had ever been transplanted. And we put GFP positive, or green fluorescent protein positive follicles. And you can see that, in fact, we were able to get live birth. So this mother was able to give rise to these live births. But I would be remiss if I didn't end with the fact that scientific problems require us to ask hard questions. We couldn't just do the basic science and think, in fact, we would have a field of medicine. We had to really work on the legal concerns, religious constraints, ethical issues, and historical context, as well as the potential transgenerational issues where a parent of a child with cancer might lose that child and then have transgenerational hope for that tissue. So all of this had to be carefully considered. And then finally, in terms of education, as I mentioned, hormones are of course complex, but they can be taught. And we have done this over time. And I urge us today on this Global Women's Breakfast Day to consider, and I know so many people at Michigan State, open your labs wide to as many people as possible. And I just applaud what you do here and thank you for that work. And, I always loved it, and it was energizing to be part of these works. And so this helps us support future women science leaders and bringing together not only the students, but their families creates opportunities for high school girls, not only in the sciences, but I think really for a lifetime of thinking both quantitatively and creatively. So my goal for the young women was not to leave high school having to be a scientist or a clinician, but leaving high school saying, I like math. 3 additional words that I think are really important. So I'll conclude with one last movie for this morning, again, for a kind of a breakfast like this. I thought this might be useful. And this was when I was running a ethics symposium on oncofertility. And really, I have to say that at the beginning, there were a lot of things that were unclear. And, you know, when Louise Brown was born, the first IVF baby, she was born to a world that was not ready for new reproductive technologies. So I wanted to, ensure that we were really thinking in a 360 way, and so brought together, again, the ecumenical council of clergy, as well as a whole variety of other groups within ethics. Adoption wasn't an option for young women with a cancer diagnosis, and we worked on that, that angle. So we have biologic and non-biologic options for cancer survivors. And so I was sitting in one of the ethics meetings. We were really in deep conversation, and someone passed me a note and said, "Are you going to be on The Young and the Restless?" And if we were in the room today, I'd ask to see how many of you watched that. I didn't, but it turned out that on that Friday afternoon, The Young and the Restless had this on its show. Oops.
But I've been on the internet, okay, and I have read there's a good chance the surgery will mean that I'll never be able to have children.
Honey, that's possible. But this surgery is necessary to save
Yes,
your...
I know, to save my life. I know. But first, I want to harvest and freeze my eggs, and then I will have the surgery.
Sweetie, that's a bad idea.
Why?
So I'll stop it there, but I'll tell you that this really was the state of affairs in 2005, that in fact, physicians were telling young women that you shouldn't be concerned about your fertility. And the 2 young men there who were looking rather dumbfounded at this young woman's concerns really represent kind of the state of affairs. And so we were really working in a time, and I'll tell you one story, which was of a doctor called me from Southern California on Martin Luther King weekend and said, well, I have a young girl who really needs to go to surgery on Tuesday, and she's refusing treatment because she wants to protect her fertility. In fact, what she had said is, will I still have menstrual cycles? So not even having the language to ask the question. She was 17 at the time. And he said no, and basically told her not to worry. And she said no. And so that young woman got onto a plane. Southwest Airlines was a great partner for us at the very beginning when the fertility options were really only at Northwestern. And she got on the plane with a mom and a dad and a boyfriend who didn't know at all what he was doing, but he was coming to support her. And we were able to get her into the surgical suite, move the surgical schedule around, and cryopreserve her ovarian tissue. And she's gone on to do great things. But the state of affairs really in 2005, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, really was this. So this was on Young and the Restless on the afternoon of a Friday in July. And so of course on Monday we were glued to the show, and here's what happens next.
But
if there is a remote possibility.
I should set it up. So she escapes from the emergency room. So she will not have treatment. She escapes from the emergency room. And on Monday, she is now in a coffee shop with this third.
If this cancer could take your life, and fighting it has to be your first priority.
What, and give up my dream? Why can't I have both?
Listen, I understand. I understand more than anybody else what it means to keep your mom's legacy alive, okay? I have no family. I have no one. And if I don't have kids, it's going to end with me.
Okay, then you understand why I have to freeze my eggs first.
From everything you've told me about Drew, everything you've said, the hope she had for you and the dreams, do you think that she would want you to sacrifice yourself for having the chance, just the chance, of a biological child? None of this is going to matter, sweetheart, if you don't make it.
So you want to support me? Then take me to Chicago, okay? And I will find a doctor that will help me keep my eggs.
If there is a remote pot.
So take me to Chicago. I'll find a doctor to help me protect my eggs. So the last prediction of this three-part presentation is when grants and paper meet clinical problems, patient needs are met and can change a devastating diagnosis into a series of life-affirming interventions, which we call bench to bedside to babies. And so perhaps the take-home messages for this breakfast are include all of us. January 25th, 2016 really was the end of a decade of raising one's hand and writing the scholarly papers, doing the work, getting the coalition together, continuing to make the case so that we could have a breakthrough when Francis Collins then said, well, we just didn't know about it. But in fact, we can now include all of us. And I think as we think about the future, we need to continue to include all of us in the scientific work as we go forward. The second piece had to do with a little bit of work-life balance that we have to learn, discover, and also teach. It's not enough just to know, we have to teach what we do. And that's an important lesson for that second part. And then the last bit for Oncofertility has been really purpose-driven. And I know so many of you, as I've gotten to know the science and the work that you're doing, you really are purpose-driven. And it's so remarkable to be part of an organization like Michigan State that really cares about, from its origins, not just knowing, but actually creating the context for others to use that. So of course, this was done with the help of federal funding in a variety of different ways. And I should mention that the human zinc work was done entirely with non-federal dollars because that's a requirement of the federal government. And all of my colleagues who are listed here have been an essential part of my life and my past and present. And I should mention in a very emotional moment, tonight, my final graduate student will give her public defense, a brilliant, brilliant young woman who will no doubt go on to the professorship like many of the other 38 graduate students. So it's really an end of an era today. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I will thank Michigan State. We have moved the Oncofertility Consortium to Michigan State, and you can find a lot of this information at that website. And I'm certainly happy to take any questions that you might have in the time that is remaining. So Angela, I hope that satisfied the interest that the group has for breakfast and maybe a bit of time left for any questions that folks might have. Angela, I'm not hearing you. I may be alone in that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Really appreciate you're such an inspiration and really want to thank you for all that you do. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to moderate the questions.
Okay, Kathy, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that remarkable set of accomplishments and remarks. I think the impact of the ability to mature an ovarian follicle outside of the body just been tremendous. I suppose I might lead off with a question, which is, it occurs to me that one of the additional opportunities beyond preserving fertility in cases of cancer would be to enable women who otherwise would need treatment with fertility drugs for IVF to forego that and instead have the ovarian follicle develop outside the body.
Right, so that is another potential application for this, as is extending hormonal health beyond the menopause. So there are in excess numbers of follicles, all of which have the potential to be part of the hormonal cycles. And so, yes, those are two other ways in which this work that really was targeted for young cancer patients gets expanded. It also can be expanded for individuals who are transgender, who are transitioning, and also interested in fertility management of biological gametes, even if they're transitioning to a different sex.
Mm-hmm. So let me invite questions from others. Yeah, Artemis.
Hello, that was a wonderful talk. Thank you very much. My question is actually related to what you just mentioned, but as it connects to the first topic. So you talked about the studies and how sex is a variable, but how do you see the future of this research as we know today that gender is not really a discrete quantity, but it's more of a variable quantity. How do you see the research evolving in the future?
Well, yeah, so that's a great question. So for sex as a biological variable and every cell having a sex, not a gender, it really always will be a sex-based assessment of sex. But I do think as we move into the human context, the ability to do clinical trials that really take advantage of the diversity, that really looks at diversity as part of the clinical trial pantheon is, I wouldn't even say it's in its infancy. It might be just even a glimmer in the eyes of those of us who have been, pushing for this for a long time. And that's really what personalized medicine has to mean. It has to mean that we have ways of looking at biology across individuals. So one sentence that I glanced over with the microfluidics, which people have been trying to do microfluidics for a long time. It's not that people wanted to stay in a petri dish. It's been a terrible way to do biology forever. It's that nobody could solve the problems of microfluidics. So when we solve that problem, it opens up a new way of personalizing or tailoring your medicine, because you can imagine stem cell derivatives of all of your internal organs can be placed within this fluidic. And then you can ask, which of 10 drugs might be the best cardiovascular drug for you? And so that actually is something we can't do. So that takes advantage of not the expression of gender, as you're asking, but really of the biological setting of your own individual physiology. And that's a breakthrough. I think that's really going to be quite exciting. And again, one of the newest device we have called the Lattice actually now really works at a fundamentally new scale. And I think that's going to be where in the future we go. Now, we also have to be unafraid, because if you look at including now sex as a biological variable, a lot of what we think we know about biology is now going to be upended. If you think you know something about how an organ works, but you've been using flat plastic where those cells sit in their own biological waste, you're only studying biological waste. You're not studying physiology. So we've got to be ready that, in fact, all of these things are disruptive technologies or disruptive ideas that are going to change the world going forward. And, I'm looking forward to all those students who go on to take advantage of this. I said that, there was a before January 25th and an after January 25th, 2016. Before, we knew nothing. And now we have to learn something new. And, many of you will know that there was some disgruntledness when we were testifying on this topic. But, I think that it's a whole new landscape. And it's as if the Louisiana Purchase was just purchased and, or something. I don't know what an analogy is, but it's a big new day of discovery for all of us.
Cholani.
Yes, thank you, Provost Woodruff. I have a question. So you have a really big role right now at MSU, and at the same time, you have done this amazing research. So how do you balance the administration work and the research work and continue this amazing field of research? And yet, I don't know. I'm kind of, I'm just amazed what you do. It's just, I don't know how you balance your life.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. One thing is that, as I said, my last graduate student, and Kathy, I almost had a tear in my eye for my 38th graduate student ending tonight. So I left my lab and all of my grants at Northwestern with students of mine who are now professors. And I've come to MSU to be fully your provost, although I like to call myself provost and professor. Because I believe, as my father said, teaching is the highest calling, and that's what professors do. And my husband has a lab. We have a grant that I'm no longer the co-PI on, but I still make sure that he knows what to do in that grant. But it is that case. And as you talk about the balance, one of the young women that was pictured, who's first came to my lab as a 12-year-old, asked me the question of work-life balance. And she said, oh, well, I don't think I can go into science because what's this thing of work-life balance? And it was so cute because she's 12, but at the same time, it just broke my heart because she's been given this cultural meme that all of us have been given as women. Hey, there's something called work-life balance. You can't, that it's antagonists to each other. So in that moment, I said to her, there's no such thing, that it's all life, that it's all life. And what you have, and when you settle on the fact that it's all life, and your kids are life, and your lab is life, and your life is life, it changes the dialogue in your head. So I urge on this Global Women's Breakfast Day to maybe do the experiment in your head. And it doesn't take away that you got to get a kid to, Boy Scouts, but it does maybe change the way we relate. And there have been memes throughout history where popular memes, when women start to get into places of power, our dignity is removed by memes of someone else that then we take on board. Work-life balance, I think, is one that we have succumbed to. So MSU women, I charge you today to do an experiment to say, it's not an antagonist, it's not a fulcrum, it's all life. And by bringing your arms around that concept, see what it does today as you teach and as you work and as you drive to Meyer, and then you get to, laundry 10 o'clock at night, and then, you read a paper at midnight. Think about it that way. Let me know how that goes. Kathy, I'd love to hear if that experiment works.
Yeah, I think that's great. I will collect input on that. I know that as Provost, you have many obligations. I don't know how much longer you're able to stay with us, if at all, but I wanted to ask you, can you stay slightly longer? Do we need to end at this point?
We do need to end. I have a 10 o'clock, and it was my fault. I overtalked.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, no, not at all. And let me close then by thanking you again for this really remarkable talk, really remarkable set of accomplishments, and for developing the courage to raise really important issues and the courage to be disruptive. And so just a total inspiration for everyone. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you all. Be well.